All right, good afternoon, everyone. So let's get started. First and foremost, thanks everyone for being here today for this webinar presented by Behavioral Economics in Action at Rotman in partnership with the Behaviorally Informed Organizations. This is our third webinar of this academic year. My name is Laura Goodyear. I'm a second-year PhD student in marketing at Rotman, a BEAR research coordinator, and the moderator for today's webinar. Behavioral Economics in Action at Rotman is a research center at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management, whose three programmatic missions are to research, educate, and engage in meaningful outreach with our academic, governmental, and industry partners. These monthly webinars are our way to hear firsthand from academics and practitioners who are making meaningful impact in the world of behavioral insights, in particular, behaviorally informed business and evidence-based public policy. So today we are delighted to have Lisa Brenneman from TD Wealth. Before I introduce Lisa, I'd like to go over the ground rules for this webinar. Following this introduction, Lisa is going to deliver a 30 to 35 minute presentation. During the presentation, please submit questions for our speaker by clicking the chat tab at the top right of your WebEx screen and typing into the entry box. These questions will be visible to all of the participants. At the end of the talk, and if there's time permitting, we will have a question and answer session where I'll select questions from the chat tab to ask to Lisa. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lisa. Lisa manages the application of behavioral finance and thought leadership at TD Wealth. She created the TD Wealth Personality Assessment tool using the 5-factor model of personality, enabling clients and advisors to identify their financial and investing blind spots, which are the key to delivering relevant financial advice that helps people achieve their goals and stay on track. Lisa also leads thought leadership, conducting and applying behavioral finance research to digital tools, training, and strategy. She collaborates with behavioral economics academics and practitioners around the world, conducting research, authoring industry reports, and creating content that educates people on how to overcome their behavioral biases. Prior to TD, Lisa worked primarily in the packaged good industry, specializing in innovation. So thank you so much, Lisa, for being here today, and please take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I'm in a conference center. It's if you're watching online, it's a gorgeous conference background here at the Metro Convention Center in Toronto. Today, I'm going to try and spend 25 to 30 minutes at the most telling you about a couple of things, and they are. See if I can get my screen to work. There we go. Our agenda today is twofold. The first thing I want to tell you about is our approach to behavioral finance at TD Wealth. We've been on this journey for nearly 5 years and have been applying behavioral finance to what we do at TD Wealth for all of that time. The second thing I want to do is give you a bit of a research debrief, and it won't go into great detail. I'll hit on some of the high points because it was a very large research study we did. And earlier this summer, July of this year, we published our first research report called Exploring Wealth Personality. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is a very short behavioral finance 101 for those who are new to the topic. I expect many of you are not new, but might need, some of you might need a small little bit of stuff to get you started on the journey with us. So let's get started. Behavioral finance is really quite simply the psychology of financial decision making. Probably not as complex. It might be complex, but it's not complicated. It's about the way we make decisions, why we do what we do, why we buy the things we buy, and the emotions that go behind our financial decisions. And it all starts with our brains. And those in the crowd that might have a background in neuroscience know that we have this part of our brain called the amygdala, which was very efficient, especially in this time, in the caveman time, when we really needed our fight or flight reflexes. Our brains perceived a physical threat and they needed to survive, and our body needed to survive. So we behaved accordingly. But our brains haven't evolved as much as we all think they have. And that's why our brains perceive financial stress exactly the same way. So if there is a financial stress in our lives, That could be what we call a life event, like getting married, having a child, getting divorced, losing a loved one, and a stock market change, a change in the markets. Our biological wiring actually hurts our investment success because we perceive that as a physical threat and we feel like we have to do something. We all do it and it's not our fault. Is when I'm speaking with clients, I like to talk to them about it in that language. Is we all somehow go through what this is called the performance milestones on the investor emotional cycle. We all, when the markets are doing really well, it's euphoric. We're thrilled, we're excited, things are going well, we're feeling really confident. And we do something that we often do when we're feeling confident. We think it's the best time to buy a stock, to enter into the market, etc. But logically speaking, that's not the right time. It's when things are at their most expensive. But then, as it always does, a market will go down and markets have to go down to go up again. And just a small tidbit here is most of us in our lifetime will go through at least 10 or more stock market major ups and downs, not full-on recessions, but major ups and downs. And so what happens is we start to get into this area. We start to get fearful, we start to panic, we get depressed, we get worried, we get anxious. Our amygdala starts to get into that phase where it's in survival mode and we start to panic. This is when many of us start to feel anxious and we start to say, perhaps we should do something about our investing. And we think we have to do something. And it's actually the worst time. In fact, our advisors hear from our clients a lot during this period, and they think they have to sell. They have to move everything into cash. They have to feel like they're doing something. But logic, again, tells us it's actually the worst time to do it. Because, as I like to say, this is when everything's on sale. This is the best time to buy, although our emotions and the way we feel about it is exactly the opposite. So the whole idea of buy low, sell high is right, but our emotions and the way our brains work feel like we need to do it the other way. And we all overestimate our willpower and our self-discipline. And this is very true for all of us. And outsourcing self-control is expression I'm sure many of you hear in the behavioral economics world. Outsourcing, when you want to lose weight, is you hire a dietitian, you go to Weight Watchers, you see your doctor. Outsourcing, when you want to become fit, is getting a personal trainer, joining a gym, setting together a program. But at the start of those things, at those activities, our willpower is at the best. So think of back at when markets are really good, that confidence, our willpower is fantastic. We tell ourselves, you know what, when the markets drop, I know I'm not going to fall into that trap, but we do. And the same with, starting perhaps a diet, and 3 or 4 weeks later, you'll probably find me on my couch eating chocolate and watching Dancing with the Stars. If you've ever heard of Carl Richards, the behavior gap, Carl Richards is a columnist for the New York Times, and he's a great sketch artist and also a financial planner. And he talks about this in that whole idea of, outsourcing self-control, and that I didn't hire an advisor. Nobody hires an advisor because they're not smart. Everybody's smart. But you hire somebody because they're not you, and they're going to help you through those times when your self-control and your willpower is at its lowest. No one can see their own blind spots, and this is 100% true, and this is something I talk about with our advisors all the time. In my world, in the wealth management world, we talk about this, that if an investor doesn't have help, they will often overreact and shift their portfolios during downturns. Often will take on more risk than they really should. They'll try to time the market. And timing the market, I've got to say, I'm sure everyone has heard of one person or another that did really well with Bitcoin. Most people didn't. It's the reason Vegas does so well and exists. Las Vegas is because people try and time things, and we're always betting. And also the people don't have properly diversified portfolios. And this is what financial advisors really can, a good one can be really good at. So with that, where did it all start at TD Wealth? Why did we get on this journey? Why did we think that behavioral finance was a really great idea in how we work with our clients? It started with your typical diagram, overlapping diagram, Venn diagram. So business, consumer, and industry. And I, as a researcher and as a specialist in innovation, I really focus on the consumer or the customer first out of everything. And we did a lot of research and a lot of work in this area, coming up with what is going to be our value proposition in the behavioral finance space. And we heard from a lot of people who are what we would consider wealth type clients. It's all about not being a number. There is nobody like me. And we call it the sea of sameness. Like all firms and all advisors are the same. And quite honestly, I'm not sure what I get for my fees. I pay them a lot of money. I wonder what they really do for that. And then when it came to the business questions and the business issues is we really need to understand our clients and our family better than anybody else. These relationships in the wealth industry last a long time, hopefully. They can be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Our advisors need to know their clients better than anybody else, how they behave, why they make the decisions they do, why they buy what they do, and why they make potentially bad decisions for themselves unknowingly when they are investing. Our leadership also talked a lot about we need to differentiate ourselves from the competition. In the wealth management industry, for those of you who aren't as familiar with it, in Canada, the competition is fierce. Robo-advisors have started to come into the space. They're not huge yet, but they definitely are there. Fees are compressing, and what this means is what once was a fee that an advisor would charge for their services, that's starting to change. Digital disruption is happening, it's accelerating, and our regulatory environment is become more and more difficult to work in. And the wealth management industry experts speak about this all the time. So when you combine these things together, we really found that we wanted to use behavioral economics and behavioral finance in what we call the discovery process. Discovery is the very first stage of the client-advisor relationship. It's the getting to know you, getting to meet you, understand your goals, your priority, your vision, your values, and what you really want to make money and why you want to invest your money. Traditionally, the industry has been one of let me invest your money for you and only that. That's really changed, and it's changing more and more and at a more rapid pace. And 5 years ago, we decided we wanted to be ahead of that. And our question was, how do we get to know our clients better than anyone else and understand them so well that we are a lifetime partner with them? So we started by creating something called our discovery tool, and it's a tool that our advisors use with clients. And to understand what we now call the client's wealth personality is we use something called the Big 5 personality traits. For those of you in the research area and psychology, you'll have seen the Big 5 many times. The 5 dimensions are openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and reactiveness. And over on the right side here, you'll, if you don't know already, you'll understand a little bit more about these personality traits. Conscientiousness is characterized by somebody who, if you're high in conscientious, very good at planning, very self-disciplined. Agreeableness, somebody who is high in agreeableness is somebody who's trusting, cooperative, and also really values social harmony. Somebody lower in agreeableness is somebody who's more questioning, challenging, wants to challenge norms constantly. Reactiveness is a very important part of the 5-factor model when it comes to wealth management. Someone who is higher in reactiveness is likely to respond much more emotionally than the average person to a market decline or to a life event. They'll react and they might want to behave very quickly and make some quick decisions. Whereas someone who's very low on reactiveness is somebody who is much more likely to be quite calm, they roll with it, and they understand the value of not reacting. Extraversion, of course, is an interesting one. Somebody who is really, really high in extraversion, very outgoing, very natural leader. Somebody very low in extraversion is significantly more likely to be reflective, think, process. Openness. High openness to experience is the innovative person, the one who in the wealth management world will want to look at new strategies, try new things, look at different ways of looking at a problem. A lower openness person is significantly more conventional. They'd like tried and true strategies. They're more pragmatic in the way they think. These 5 dimensions are not, they're correlated, but they're actually quite separate as well. We chose the 5-factor model for a number of reasons. The first is it's very stable across a person's life. The second is that it's probably one of the most researched personalities models in the world. It's one of the highest reliabilities as well, in the mid-80s of reliability. And it's also in the public domain. And we like to tell our clients we don't have a little black box. This is something you could look up yourself, but we want to be experts in how we apply it to the way we work with you. So here's a practical example I want to show you of how we use it to uncover a client's unique wealth personality. And I did it for Mitch and Cam. Most people would know Mitch and Cam from Modern Family. And if you've ever watched this show, you can really see how the 5 factors play out for them. And one of the great benefits, of course, is that both Mitch and Cam, if they were a client of mine, they would both go through the assessment and they'd look at their scores together. So you see there Mitch in the green and Cam in the white, right? Cam being the much more social, outgoing, he's the more spontaneous, whereas Mitch a little bit more reserved. Quick to react, of course, more reactive, Mitchell, Cam a little less so. Innovative, well there you're seeing Cam way out in front, but self-disciplined and conscientiousness is definitely where you'll see Mitchell, right? The lawyer, the very self-disciplined person. Amenable versus questioning, that's the agreeableness, and that's where you definitely see somebody like Cam. Always wants everybody to be happy and things going on around him. So, as I mentioned, in 2015, we started this journey. We're almost 5 years into it. We started with just the tool, our discovery tool, and now we have a very large integrated program that touches every single part of our wealth management. I'm going to show you a couple of things here. This is our Behavioral Finance public website. So if you want to find more about what we do, just go to td.com/behavioral finance. His link is up there in the corner. This is just a screen grab from the front page. Watch the video. Also, here you can see over on these tabs right here, the thought leadership section. That's where you'll find a lot of the interesting content that we do and that we write. And then some of our content. On the left side, I'm sure if you are a student at Rotman, you've probably heard about our wealth psychology 10-part video series with Bear. And as you can see, there's actually 10 short videos all on different financial blind spots and behavioral biases when it comes to investing. And stars of the show are people like Dilip Soman, Lisa Kramer, and Avni Shah. Each video is about 2 minutes long. They're fun, they're entertaining, and they're also very educational. The second big thing I wanted to talk to you about is our our behavioral finance industry report. And that's what I'm going to spend the rest of our time talking about. I want to tell you a little bit more about the research that we did and some of the interesting outcomes and results on that. So, a little bit about it. At TD Wealth, we 100% believe that this is going to help us uncover the most valuable insights to better serve our clients. And we share these results with the academic community, wealth management industry, behavioral economic practitioners. And one of the reasons for that is we are able to have very large studies, and we know that the information is extremely valuable and helpful to different people. We are committed, and we are going to be doing this research every year. So this is the first one. The second research study we've already completed, and I am underway of writing the next research report. And then also I am about to start our third research study. So every year you'll see a new research study come out from TD Wealth. The first study, though, we really wanted to keep it simple, and it was, let's determine how different personality traits impact financial planning and investing behaviors. We really did this so we could compare and contrast different groups: gender, age, affluence, and relationship status. We chose these ones primarily because these impact our business model at TD Wealth. We definitely did not want to imply any causality in any direction. So a couple important caveats before we get started. We wanted these cohorts to highlight the differences in the data. We do not ever intend to create or reinforce any stereotypes. These are averages. Remember that these are averages. So for instance, I will say at a certain point in time when I'm showing you more of the research that I could say something like women on average. And remember that's on average, because just because we were able to find in this data that women on average behave like this, it doesn't mean all women behave like that, or vice versa. And also, don't ever think that you can singularly view somebody through one cohort. Obviously, for instance, I'm a woman, I'm in a certain age group, I'm in a different affluence level, and I'm in a different relationship status. You stack all those together, it makes a very different view of it all. Okay, let's first look at the methodology. We surveyed almost 1,700 people across Canada. It's a very large study. It was an online quant study, market study, which means we had geographical distribution across Canada, and it was both English and French. Now, here's one thing to always remember is, as I'm showing you the data, is all respondents were Canadian and all affluent, more than $100,000 in investable assets. This is quite interesting because, as many of you know who do quite a bit of research, there sometimes are constraints, and using students or undergrads or graduates in an academic environment, I have the unique capability of being able to reach beyond that. But do remember, this is people who are in that wealth cohort that have more than $100,000 in investable assets. So here's the categories to remember. For age, we broke it into 3. Young investors, 18 to 34, middle-aged investors, 35 to 54, and then older, 55 and up. For gender, male and female, but we did ask the question about gender identity. What gender do you most identify with? And that's how the results are displayed. Affluence and emerging affluence. This is important when we work in the wealth management industry. So mass affluent, people who have 100,000 to almost 750 in investable assets. And then a common expression you may have heard before is high net worth, 750,000 in investable assets and up. We also have another category we call emerging affluent. And those are people who are 25 to 34 years old that don't necessarily have a high affluence, but they already have a fairly significant household income, and they will become affluent in this area in a very short period of time. We also looked at singles, couples, and parents. The last thing I'm going to tell you about the methodology before I get into the results are all of these respondents also completed the 5-factor model of personality questionnaire. We use the 50 statement version of the 5-factor model of personality. There are a number of different versions. There's some that are in 8 questions, some are 16. We use the 50, and there's a few others. The reason we use the 50 is it does have one of the highest rates of reliability, and that's why we use it. On average, it takes a client approximately 3.5 to 4 minutes to complete. So let's look at some findings. So those with low conscientiousness tend to plan less. And this makes a lot of sense when you sort of think through what conscientiousness means. 45% of those in the study did not have a goal-based financial plan. This was quite surprising to me when I saw it. And that's mainly because these are people that do have significant assets. So when you have significant assets and not having a plan, that's quite troublesome. This, as I mentioned, really strongly correlated to lower scores on the conscientiousness dimension. Those with a goal-based plan, though, tended to feel more ready for retirement. So, quite interesting. People who are higher conscientiousness and had a financial plan with an advisor were 52% more likely to be very satisfied, that's top box, with their retirement readiness compared to those with no plan at all. So this being said, though, somebody with high conscientiousness, more likely to have a plan, and they are actually significantly more likely to say that they are feeling ready for retirement. And that is huge. Financial plan on their own, I'm sure you're thinking to yourself, well, without an advisor, only 28% were more likely to say they're very satisfied with their retirement readiness. So there's a great sort of storyline there. This wasn't behavioral, but we still found it quite interesting, as people tend to count on personal savings for retirement. Sources of retirement income. So 47% personal savings, all or most of the retirement income, 37% expected pension, and 7% expected their home. Yes, I'm sure you're wondering, is that a bit skewed to major urban centers? Yes, it is somewhat about the home. But the fact that almost half are expecting their personal savings are going to contribute, I find this makes the above statements even more important, that having the goal-based plan and working with an advisor is going to help people get there much better. Because conscientiousness, not everybody can be highly conscientious. So we have to work to ensure our clients have something behind them on that. So let's look at findings by gender. So this is a cut right from our report. So if you want to see the results, you can go right to that. Women are higher in conscientiousness, reactiveness, and openness than men. Men are less agreeable than women. Men and women perceive investing quite differently, and planning and investment management. So women, remember, high conscientiousness, self-disciplined, and more likely to really enjoy this idea of planning, a goal-based plan, etc. Higher propensity for savings for women, reviewing plans every year, etc. But the other thing is women are higher in the reactiveness scale, and you'll see that over here, higher reactiveness. That means a little bit more reactive at the first sign of decline. Men are less agreeable. Looking down here, significantly less agreeable than women. They will question more. They will probably be a bit more somewhat difficult when dealing with things. But also, when it comes to reactiveness, a lot more calm under pressure, which is a very, very good thing to have. So while you're probably wondering, on each one of these, there's not a good or bad. If you're at one end of the scale versus the high end of the scale, it's not math. It's not you want to be high in everything. It is who you are, and there is very good about either side of that. Okay, so when it comes to men, they're much more likely to take shorter term risks, which is interesting. Not really as focused on the long-term plan. And as you might have, if you've ever heard of overconfidence bias, men are more likely to be more prone to overconfidence bias. Okay, I want to show you a few of the other questions, answers to a few of the other questions we asked. Remember when I said about having a plan? Women, look at this, are much more likely to have a plan with an advisor than a man. But the satisfaction with readiness for retirement, that's the top box, very satisfied, is about the same. Now, for those who have an advisor, are they worth the money versus are they confident in their advisor? Women are a lot more confident in their advisor, much more nervous at the first sign of decline. And we also want to look at statement review, because when you get your monthly statement, whether it's in the mail or the online, women and men behave quite differently, and has a lot to do with the two of the bigger dimensions, and that is conscientiousness and reactiveness. So do women look closely at every statement? A lot less, less than men. Men will get more into the details, want to dive deep into it because of that reactiveness dimension, whereas women like to look at the bigger, fuller, fulsome picture of it all. And we'll only really dive in if there's something interesting or something looks odd or different. So let's move on. Let's move on to the findings by age. So remember, age 18 to 34, 35 to 54, and 55 plus. Younger are lower in conscientiousness and agreeableness, but higher in reactiveness. This is really interesting, and it's part of the challenge that the industry is facing, is understanding and that knowledge and the value that goes into having a plan and getting started and being ready for whatever life throws at you. So younger, 18 to 34, much less likely and less inclined to have a goal-based plan, much more quick to react to market cycles. And the combination of that is unfortunate. And that's because it negates what most younger people have on their side, and that's time. Time is the ultimate runway in order to make sure that you can reach your goals. The effect of compound interest is definitely in a younger person's favor. The however, though, is that the financial and wealth personality is lower in conscientiousness, not as inclined to think that a goal-based plan is important, not as high in agreeableness, and higher in reactiveness, that anxiety and panic that we all feel. Middle age, a bit lower in agreeableness, reactiveness, and the lowest in all in extraversion, which is actually quite interesting. If you look at it, is somebody who is quite low in extraversion, reflective, quieter, etc. The hypothesis, and what I sometimes wonder about this is, when you get to middle age, you've gone through a couple of market cycles. You've seen it happen. You start to understand that this is going to happen over and over again. So might be a little bit more likely to be less nervous about that sort of thing. And the oldest cohort, 55 plus, the higher than the other in agreeableness and also in conscientiousness. Now, what we really found is age really appears to be the strongest indicator of personality type and investing behavior. You see sort of some of the biggest swings in the data in this area. So let's look at a few more of the statistics. And this is probably not a huge surprise. Somebody in the younger cohort is significantly lower than the rest on having a plan with an advisor, or even having a plan at all, than somebody who is older. We wouldn't expect somebody to be younger to have satisfaction with their readiness for retirement, but I do, worry overall that people 55 plus who are affluent, remember that, aren't feeling very satisfied with their retirement readiness. Only 40%ish are. As you can see, though, in here, the value of advice is obviously quite troublesome for those who are younger. Not feeling necessarily that they are getting the advice they need for them. And I would say this is an industry challenge for sure, is we have a number of people in this age cohort who could use some great advice, who are seeking advice, but the industry models haven't really catered to them yet. The nervousness to decline at the first sign of decline, obviously for somebody who is younger, quite a bit different than those in other age cohorts. Okay, let's look at affluence. This surprised me a little bit. Emerging affluent are higher in reactiveness and lower in agreeableness. Mass affluent and high net worth are quite similar. So if you remember, mass affluent are those that have 100,000 to 750,000 in investable assets, and high net worth are 750,000 in investable assets and up. Mass affluent and high net worth quite similar. So what's interesting, though, is how the emerging affluent, those who are 25 to 34 and who are already making a very good income and will be on the affluence radar quite soon. When it comes down to it, investable assets don't really seem to have an impact on investing behaviors. And as you say, I can say on here, unless you don't have any assets yet. That's when it really seems to make an impact. I do worry about the emerging affluent segment, of course, because those are the groups that could be in danger of reaching whatever their retirement goals, their financial goals, their goals for owning a home or travel or family or whatever. It does, there's not a lot in their favor when it comes to their personality, but remember, a lot in the emerging affluent favor in their favor when it comes to time. So let's look at a couple of more things here on the findings by affluence. You see again quite a difference in the having a plan, satisfaction with retirement readiness. You see this number here on the high net worth jump up, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They're not just older people, there's quite a bit of overlap between the older segment and the high net worth segment, but you also see that they have that significantly more investable assets. And also the confidence in their advisor, the value of their advisor. There's one last thing that I'm going to note before I open it up for questions is this. And I'm sure some of you who are data watchers notice this on all of these, is the difference between I'm very confident in my advisor, the top box, and the value of my advisor, worth every dollar in fees, is quite different in depending on the segment. And this is definitely an industry concern. This, in the way I say it, if I was a client, it'd be like, I really like my advisor. They do great things for me. They help me with everything. They invested well for me. They made me a goal-based plan. They helped me stick to the plan. I'm feeling ready for retirement. But I don't know if they're worth the fees. Are they worth all of the fees? And therein is where we work with our clients and the concepts of behavioral finance to use our wealth personality assessment to help our advisors and clients, particularly clients, know themselves that much better, and their advisors know them that much better, so that they can help them add value to their conversations and definitely get their folks to their goals. So I am going to stop there. The last thing I'm going to tell you is there's a couple of links here if you want to take a look. td.com/behavioral finance is where the full industry report is. All the data and data tables are there, plus all of the analysis. And then make sure you go to moneytalkgo.com/wealth psychology, where you can watch professors at Rotman in action on the wealth psychology video series. So, did you want to take that over, and if anyone has any questions?
Great, thank you so much, Lisa. This is really interesting research that you and the folks at TD are up to. So I was just wondering, while you were talking, is TD using the wealth personality tool to identify types of investments that might be more amenable to certain types of personalities, or are you using it more so to reduce the biases that certain personality types sort of might fall prey to, or is it a combination of the two?
It's a combination. So we initially we used it very much for helping our clients overcome their biases, how we work with them, but we also use it for understanding the client's risk and their risk assessment. Understanding how much risk they're willing to take, how much risk they're available to take, and therefore modeling a portfolio that works for them, because you want somebody to be extremely comfortable in their portfolio, because those down market times, you want them to feel that they don't have to worry about that. So if somebody is highly reactive, we want to make sure that they are well served in the portfolio and they actually will achieve the goals that they want to. Next question.
Great, yeah, so we have another question here, and this one is actually about the advisor's personality. So when you're using the personality tool, are you also taking the advisor's wealth personality into consideration? And do you use this to match clients with people, or you know, what type of role does the advisor's personality trait play into sort of this dynamic?
It actually plays quite a bit. So what we do is all of our advisors obviously has their own wealth personality, which when you think about it, they're human too. And we all fall prey to different types of behavioral biases. So what our advisors do is they have their own sort of cheat sheet of how they manage and also then how they give advice. And then depending on the wealth personality of their client, they actually are trained very carefully on how they work differently with each type of client. So we don't necessarily want a world where an advisor has all the same types of clients. We want our advisors to be able to work with everybody and adjust themselves. And I think that's one of the biggest things about this area of behavioral finance and people's personalities is, and I talk about this all the time with the advisors, and I say, we're not here to change our clients. That's not your job, is to change them. Your job is to help them get to their goals despite whatever financial personality they have. So let's do a good job of you as the advisor adjusting who you are to help them do that.
Great. Similarly, there's another question that sort of relates to this last answer. And that's about how are you training advisors on using these insights and these skills to better interact with their clients?
It's quite extensive, actually, the training we do with them. We have a lot of what we call our practice consultants who are out in the field every single day, one-on-one with advisors. I do a fair bit of training as well. We have a lot of different tools. And one of the things about our discovery tool is while it gives the client, the person, their wealth personality and help them understand it, that has a whole component of education that each advisor gets so that they can, and how they work differently with that client. I even have it worked out of what type of articles or videos that type of person may like more than some of your other clients, so that they can get even more personalized. And that's the whole idea is, a lot of people everybody has anchoring, let's just use that, or everybody has loss aversion to a certain extent, but to the extent is different between you and I and Liz and Laura. We're all a bit different in that area. So what we want to make sure is that when using our wealth personality assessment, that advisor knows that person quite individually. So instead of talking to all of their clients as though they all have the same degree of loss aversion and feel it exactly the same way, they're able to tailor their advice to that client based specifically on the way that client is and their financial personality.
Great. So sort of shifting gears a little bit more into the actual study itself. One of our participants is asking, did you study which behavioral biases or just any behavioral biases, and if they're more prominent in different types of personality traits?
Right. So yes. So what I can tell you is as we all know, there are many different types of biases, hundreds in fact. We narrowed it down to 10 to 15 that we like to work with our advisors and with the clients. And the reason for that is those are the ones that seem to impact investing decisions and planning decisions the most. I would say anchoring is a very strong one. And then the other one that I see a lot is overconfidence. And then the last one that I would speak about, obviously, is loss aversion. Going to see that quite a bit.
Great, and I think we have time for one more question. So briefly then, can you expand on why you were surprised with the affluent sample counting on personal savings for retirement more than anything else?
Yeah. The affluence area surprised me so much, and surprised a lot of my colleagues as well who did the research. There's always an expectation that people who have more money behave differently. And when it comes right down to it, yeah, they might, but their core personality traits aren't that different. Conscientiousness being one of them. So you can be high conscientious and have done very well with a modest salary, a modest income, a modest life, and lead a very good retirement. You can also be highly conscientious and have done very well and have a much higher salary. You're both still highly conscientious. So when it comes to readiness for retirement, I think that it's probably one of those interesting things where it ends up being an internal, intrinsic feeling of, if I have a certain income and I've been conscientious and invested it well and had a great goal-based plan and worked well with my advisor, I am just as satisfied as possibly somebody who makes a lot more money and is equally as conscientious. So personality traits, which was interesting, didn't seem to be as different when it came to affluence as did age. Age seemed to really pop out to us. And the one thing I probably should finish with that I didn't say in the beginning, it's very important, is you have to remember when you're looking at this, and if you're planning on using the data or looking at it at all, is this was not a longitudinal study. So be very careful about not using an expression like, when people get older, they behave like this. We don't know that. This is a snapshot in time. So what we can say is people who are 18 to 34 behave like this, and people who are 55 plus behave like this. But we actually don't know if the 18 to 34-year-olds will behave like the 55 plus do now. We know that they are at this point in time behaving like this. And I think that's why it's important to constantly be doing studies like this in order to be tracking and ensuring you're dealing and creating the right solution set for the clients and the people in that age group at that time.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. So I know you have to get going, so we're going to cut it a little bit short today. But I'm sure Lisa would be happy to answer any other questions that might still be lingering afterwards. So again, we'd like to thank Lisa for leading our webinar today. A full recording of this webinar will be available at our website by clicking on the side tab labeled Events and then clicking the sub tab labeled Bear Webinar Series. Our next webinar, we will hear from Jennifer Robson, an Associate Professor of Political Management at Carleton University, on December 4th. So thank you again, Lisa, and thank you all for attending. You can exit this webinar by closing your WebEx screen.